I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, the Manhattan skyline stretching like a promise across the horizon. The city pulsed below, taxis honking, people hurrying, but up here, everything was calm. My silk blouse felt cool against my skin, my heels perfectly matched the marble floor, and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the corner table. On the sleek glass desk behind me, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting another investor update or an international call. Instead, it was a message from my mother. Heard about the Forbes feature. Your father wants to visit. Tonight. My stomach tightened, though my face stayed perfectly still, the way it always did when I read their messages. Of course, they'd want to come now. Now that my company, had expanded to 32 countries, now that my name was in headlines, now that people finally saw me as someone worth listening to. I let out a soft, ironic laugh and set the phone down. This was the moment I used to dream about, them seeing me, really seeing me, but I hadn't expected it to feel this complicated. I was 21 when I first pitched my idea to them. It was summer break, and I'd just come home from college with a notebook full of scribbles and a heart full of excitement. We were sitting at the kitchen table. My mom was sorting laundry, and my dad was reading the paper, the smell of his black coffee filling the room. Okay, hear me out, I said, sliding my notebook onto the table. What if there was a way to connect small local artisans to global buyers, not just on social media, but through a curated online platform with guaranteed shipping and fair prices? My dad didn't even look up. Sounds complicated. You should focus on getting a real job first. My chest tightened. But this could be a business, Dad. I've already mapped out a plan. I could. He folded the paper and looked at me with that practical, dismissive frown I'd known all my life. Emily, ideas don't pay bills. Get your degree, get hired somewhere stable, then think about hobbies. The word hobby stung. Mom gave me a sympathetic smile, but said nothing. And in that silence, I felt my excitement deflate like a balloon. I nodded, holding my breath so my voice wouldn't shake. Right. Sure. That night, I sat in my room, the notebook open in my lap, tears staining the margins of my plans. I wanted their approval so badly, but something inside me, something stubborn, refused to let their words be the end of my dream. The next morning, I visited my grandmother, the only person who ever seemed to believe in me without hesitation. She listened, her wrinkled hands folded over her cane, eyes shining. Then prove them wrong, sweetheart, she said, her voice soft but steady. Take this. She handed me a small silver locket, one she'd worn for years. Inside was a tiny slip of paper with 3 words written in her neat, careful handwriting. Keep going, Emily. I wore it every day after that. And that summer, I decided I would build my future, with or without their blessing. I started small. I took the money I'd saved from part-time jobs and bought a refurbished laptop. I spent nights teaching myself everything, coding, digital marketing, supply chain basics, sitting cross-legged on my bed with cold coffee and the hum of my desk fan as my soundtrack. At first, nothing worked. My first website crashed 3 times. The first artisans I contacted never replied. And the first time I tried to pitch my idea to a local shop owner, he smiled politely and said, "That's cute, honey, but we already have Facebook." I cried that night, quietly into my pillow, but the next morning I woke up and tried again. My first breakthrough came 6 months later when a woman named Denise replied to one of my hundreds of cold emails. She ran a small boutique in Portland and loved the idea of buying directly from artisans overseas. "I think you've got something here," she told me over Zoom, her voice warm but businesslike. "If you can get me 10 products by next month, I'll take a chance on you." That was it, the first real door that opened. I worked like crazy to deliver. When Denise sent me the payment for that first order, I stared at the notification for a full minute, tears running down my cheeks. From there, it snowballed, slowly at first, then faster. I partnered with a retired logistics consultant who believed in my mission and offered to mentor me. He taught me how to negotiate shipping rates, vet suppliers, and handle paperwork. There were nights when I stayed awake until sunrise, double-checking orders, answering emails from 3 time zones at once. There were weeks when I lived on instant noodles because every dollar went back into the business. But there were wins, too. The day I shipped my first 100 product order. The moment I hired my first freelancer to help with marketing. The first profit month that allowed me to move into a tiny studio apartment, my own place, with a desk by the window where I could see the city lights. Through it all, I stayed quiet on social media. I posted vague photos, a laptop here, a cup of coffee there, but never numbers, never anything that would make my parents suspect how big this was becoming. By the time my platform hit its first million in sales, I had expanded into 5 countries, built a small but loyal team, and secured an investor who called me the future of ethical e-commerce. I remember standing in that tiny apartment the night the deal closed, holding my grandmother's locket in my hand, whispering, "We did it." And no one in my family had any idea. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and I stepped into my headquarters' main lobby. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh lilies from the arrangements we had delivered every Monday. My parents were already there, standing awkwardly near the reception desk, looking around like tourists in a foreign country. "Emily," my mom said, her voice just a little too bright. My dad's expression was harder to read, a mix of pride and discomfort, as though he was bracing himself. "Come on," I said, smiling politely. "Let me give you a tour." As we walked through the glass hallways, my heels clicking softly against the floor, I noticed the way their eyes darted around, taking in everything, the open concept offices buzzing with energy, the walls lined with framed magazine covers and awards, the massive world map with glowing pins marking every country we operated in. When we reached my office, I let them step inside first. My dad stopped short. "This is your office?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," I said simply, moving past them to stand behind my desk. I rested my hands on the cool glass surface, letting the moment breathe. The office was everything I had once dreamed of. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, a shelf filled with products from artisans I'd partnered with, a sleek white couch with throw pillows that matched the company's colors. My grandmother's locket rested in a glass case on the side table, my private reminder of where this all began. Mom walked over to the window, running her fingers along the frame. "It's beautiful," she murmured. I nodded, then turned to face them. "I didn't just get a job, Mom. I built this. The platform you told me to put aside? It's now in 32 countries. We've shipped over 2 million products worldwide." I let that sink in before continuing. "I'm not an employee here. I'm the founder and CEO." For a moment, there was only silence. My dad blinked, his jaw tightening as though he couldn't quite process it. "You own this whole thing?" he finally asked. "Yes," I said. "Every decision, every risk, it was me." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Emily, we had no idea." "No," I said softly, "you didn't. You told me it was just a hobby, that I should focus on something real. But this is as real as it gets." I walked around the desk, standing just a few feet from them now. "Do you know what it feels like to be laughed at for your dream? To have the people you love most dismiss you before you even start? I built all of this with that feeling in my chest." Dad's shoulders slumped. "We just wanted you to be safe. We didn't want you to get hurt." "I know," I said, and for the first time, I felt the anger melt into something softer. "But the truth is, that hurt is exactly what pushed me to do this." They both stood there, taking in every detail, the office, the awards, the quiet confidence in my voice. And for the first time in years, I saw it in their faces. Respect. I stepped back from my desk and let the silence stretch a little longer. They had seen the office, the awards, the global maps, but now it was time for them to understand that nothing had changed, except that I had the upper hand. "I'm glad you're here," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "But if we're going to move forward as a family, things need to change." Dad frowned, eyebrows knitting together. "Change how?" I took a slow breath. "First, I need you to understand that dismissing ideas doesn't work anymore. Words have power, and mine built this company. So any future conversations about my career? Respect the choice I've made. No judgment, no sarcasm." Mom nodded, biting her lip. "We understand." Second, I continued, I want honesty. I don't need approval, but I do need authenticity. If you want to be part of my life, it has to be real. That means admitting when you've been wrong and trying to do better. I paused, letting it sink in. Third, support, not interference. I want you to take your own dreams seriously. Mom, I'd love to see you finally open that art studio you've always talked about. Dad, maybe it's time you try that cooking class you've been putting off. We all deserve to pursue what we love. They both looked at me, stunned at the clarity and precision in my voice. I could see the shame in Dad's eyes, the regret in Mom's. But they were listening, truly listening. And finally, I said, softening slightly, I want kindness. From all of us. No more old patterns. No more minimizing, no more belittling. If we can do this, we can have a real relationship. I stepped back, folding my arms. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for effort.
For change.
That's the only way we move forward. They nodded slowly, tears glinting in their eyes. Mom reached out and held my hand. We're willing to try, Emily. We're so sorry for not believing in you. I smiled, a mixture of relief and pride. That's a start. But remember, words aren't enough. Actions speak louder. Prove me right, for yourself and for all of us. I felt a weight lift, a quiet power settling over me. I wasn't just the daughter they had ignored. I was the woman who had built a global business, who had set the rules for her own life, and who now had the strength to redefine family on her terms. Weeks passed, and slowly, I began to notice changes. My parents were different, smaller, subtle shifts at first. Mom had signed a lease for her little art studio, her eyes sparkling as she showed me photos of the space filled with canvases and paint. Dad joined a local cooking club, sharing his first homemade bread with a shy, proud smile. They were making an effort. Not perfect, but real. And for the first time in years, I felt our relationship breathing, growing into something I could finally respect. I stood in my office one evening, the city lights twinkling below like scattered stars, and ran my fingers over my grandmother's silver locket. Keep going, Emily. I smiled at it, a symbol of the courage and persistence that had brought me here. From rejection and doubt to sleepless nights, failures and small victories, this journey had shaped me into someone I barely recognized before. Stronger, wiser, unshakable. And yet, I had learned that power wasn't just about wealth or recognition. It was about the choices we made, the boundaries we set, and the people we allowed into our lives. I had demanded respect, yes, but I had also offered forgiveness, not because I owed it, but because I chose to rise above resentment. I poured myself a cup of coffee, taking in the warm, familiar aroma, and let the weight of the moment settle. My parents had begun to understand, and in turn, I had begun to see them as people capable of growth. For a long time, I had equated success with proving others wrong. Now, I understood it as proving to myself that I could build a life of my own design, while still holding space for love and connection. I placed the locket back on my desk and whispered softly, almost to myself, "We did it. We really did it." And in that quiet, victorious moment, I realized I am not defined by their disbelief, by their dismissal, or by the limitations they tried to place on me. I am defined by my courage, my persistence, and the life I have created. I smiled, standing tall against the backdrop of the glittering city, and thought to myself, I am Emily. I am unstoppable.